Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, the political dragon here in our offices in the Bronx, and it's October 25th, approximately 3:30 in the afternoon. I wanted to talk a little bit about free speech. I wanted to talk about the death of free speech at our higher education institutions, the future leaders of our government, and many governments and corporations around the world. It is a terrifying thought, and we need to talk about it in context. Now, before we get started with that, we do want to mention that if this is the first time you are seeing our channel, we welcome you. We thank you for being part of our audience. We want you to know that we do long-form political commentary, and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out on all the social media that the internet overlords will allow to be able to hear your voice from anywhere in the world. So if your government doesn't agree, if the internet giants don't agree, we don't care. We want to hear your voice every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So the question that's before us right now is our future. The question is free speech alive, especially in the United States, what is seen as the bastion of free speech around the world? In fact, if you were to take the United States out of the equation, there is no nation that even approaches the same levels of free speech that is afforded to the average common citizen. It's unheard of in the history of the world, and even in modern days, even in first world nations, there is no peer to the United States on that level. But it seems that as we continue to move forward, what we are seeing is that instead of the nations of the world, first and second and third world nations, trying to raise themselves up and reach the same level of freedom of speech in the United States, what we're seeing is that the United States is lowering itself to approach the standards of every other nation in the world, and perhaps even becoming more autocratic than it has ever been before. Let's explain what we mean. At this point, it is a fact, it is empirical and unquestioned that on October 7th, the terrorist organization Hamas, which is also the government of the Gaza Strip, unilaterally decided to attack civilians in Israel. That is a fact. They killed over 1,300 individuals in the first days of what has become a war between Israel and Hamas. The first war that Israel has been involved in 50 years. Some estimates say as high as 1,700. We know that over 200 individuals have been taken prisoner, many of them from countries outside of Israel, including the United States, that has somewhere between 10 to 14 individuals currently known to be hostages, perhaps more. We know that there are individuals from Britain and Germany, Nepal, all across the world that have been taken hostage indiscriminately. That these hostages, many of them, have been abused, they have been tortured, they have been sexually abused, and there is no justification for this. Again, we will say, there is no justification for these acts of terror by Hamas, a known international terrorist organization supported by Iran. That being stated, we did see that almost universally, we have seen the reaction around the world as a denouncement of these repugnant actions, this open act of terrorism. But it wasn't universal. We saw that individuals like the Democratic Socialists of America, the far left within the United States and around the world, and many colleges took the side of saying that Israel, the victim of this terrorist attack, were, and I quote, entirely responsible for this act of terror. That came from Harvard itself. 34 student organizations at Harvard signed a letter saying that they absolutely support Hamas, a terrorist organization, in the killing of civilians. It sounds almost too incredulous to believe. And yet, that is exactly what happened. Within a few days of the declaration by Harvard University, by its students, to support Hamas and its act of terror, the Harvard University finally decided to make a statement officially for their organization. And they stated that they denounced the terrorism of Hamas. And they tried to distract and to sidestep the rebuke against its students who had decided to support terrorism. We saw this very much play out with the Democratic Socialists of America, where many members, elected officials, took a step back and distanced themselves from the support of Hamas that their organization did throughout the United States. And holding a rally in New York City on Sunday, October 9th, in the middle of the attacks still being ongoing. So Harvard employed a tactic of distraction, of trying to bury the lead, to soften the blow against the university's name and its students going forward. In fact, we have seen an ongoing attempt by the academics at Harvard University and other universities across this nation to protect their students and their institutions from any backlash for their support of terrorism in the world. They believe that they should not feel any kind of consequence for the actions that they have taken, extremist actions that do not match neither Democrats in the United States, the public of the United States, or most nations around the world, with the exception of the leading supporter of terror in the world, Iran, and its puppets in Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen and other such terrorist organizations. In fact, at the same time that the academic leaders of Harvard, who taught these students to support Hamas, to inform them of their ideological preferences, while they were there saying, hold these students blameless because it was just their opinion and not the opinion of Harvard, those same students decided to hold a, quote, die-in and to double down on their support of Hamas and the terrorist acts that it had committed, even as Americans were held hostage, even as hundreds around the world were held hostage by Hamas as human shields, another violation of human rights, and another act of terrorism. All of this is historical fact. It is indisputable. It is empirically correct. And unlike the attempt by many progressive organizations to substitute feelings and their perceived truth as the truth, this is factual, everything that we have just detailed. And it is recorded both in news media, though buried, as well as something that is embedded in the memory of Americans and those around the world. Yet Harvard was not alone in this support of absolute evil. Many other institutions had professors and academics and student bodies that also supported this act of wanton terror, like Cornell University. In Cornell, Russell Rickford, an African Studies history professor, openly supported and detailed his exhilaration, his unmitigated joy that Hamas, a terrorist organization, killed 1,300 civilians, including untold numbers of children. In fact, beheading at least 40 babies. And he was exhilarated by this. And is it truly a surprise that there are so many students at colleges like Cornell, like Harvard, that are being taught by these individuals who are excited by the death, the senseless murder of babies? Are we surprised that the students would then take this action as well? Mind you, just like what we saw at Harvard University, we see that Cornell University is trying to minimize and mitigate the damage to the institution and its students. They're trying to distance themselves from this obvious support of terrorism. And as a result, Russell Rickford is now taking a sabbatical, a 1 year off, so that the university no longer has to address or deal with his open support of terrorism and the fact that he is teaching, we would believe, either subconsciously or consciously teaching his students this shared hatred and support of terrorism. The point is that they want to hide this from you. They want you to forget. They do not want you to remember that they believe in the use of terrorism to promote their political partisan agenda. And that is all it can be described as, a political partisan agenda that is willing to use the murder of babies, the use of hostages as human shields, to allow it to impose their will on others. It is that straightforward, and it cannot be taken any other way. That is the empirical fact of what is happening. It is not a matter of opinion. That is what happened. But the question comes up, how did this happen? How has this happened at our institutions of higher learning? Because free speech is dead. In the 2024 College Free Speech Survey, the most recent to be conducted, Harvard University came in 248th out of 248 colleges and universities in America. Dead last. And yet lauded as one of the highest institutions of learning in the nation. And we would suggest that you cannot learn if you cannot be free. If you cannot have a conversation, even a conversation that is disputed, if you cannot do that freely, you cannot learn freely, but you can be indoctrinated. And thus we see how 34 institutions in the college, 34 student organizations would come out and support terrorism and want to be held blameless because of that support, and why we would see institutions like Cornell and others to follow suit. Not only is Harvard 248th, Binghamton University, one of the most acclaimed Sunni state of New York universities in the southern tier of New York, was rated 228th in terms of free speech. One of the things notable in the survey was the response by students at Binghamton University stating that they have to hide themselves if they do not have the correct liberal ideology, and that is not free speech. Of course, Cornell University formerly actively employed Russell Rickford, who was exhilarated at the murder of babies. Well, that university is 212th in denying free speech. One of the lowest ranked universities in the nation. And not to be excluded, there is, of course, Rutgers University, which rated at 120th. My former alma mater that I had went to, although they rated 234th for the ability of students to feel like they can have a conversation about anything politically, to share their views comfortably on the campus. 234th out of 248 college institutions. While overall they may be rated in the middle, they are hardly anywhere that someone would say free speech is allowed. Overall, this is terrifying. We are seeing free speech die at our highest institutions, and this should terrify us as the leaders of Harvard, Cornell, Binghamton University, of Rutgers University. These are the individuals that will go on to become leaders in our political elections. They are going to become our leaders of industry. And what are they going to do then? We posed a simple question on October 12th. In our reaction to Harvard, BLM, the Democratic Socialists of America, and the fringe organizations that supported Hamas and terrorism, we asked the question, what happens when these individuals take leadership roles and they are willing to support terrorism to enforce their ideology upon others? How are they going to treat you? But once again, we have to ask that same question. We now see Harvard is not a bastion of free speech. Cornell, Binghamton University, even Rutgers University do not support the open discussion and debate. This is the same kind of environment, this same kind of ideology that allowed people to think that Copernicus was the bad guy when he said that the universe did not circle the earth. He, in fact, was correct. And yet, to this day, we see that same mentality of oppression, that same mentality of consensus being forced on everyone else. And we have seen this not just when it comes to American politics or international politics, but we see that in the mandate for an experimental drug being injected into human beings without knowing what any of the side effects would be. We have seen that same kind of mentality when our borders have been opened and they are overwhelming states and cities and introducing threats to our national security. 169 known or suspected terrorists entering the United States and being caught. 169, an increase of over 46 times what we have seen in 2020. This may well be the cornerstone of America that crumbles first, and as that absolute freedom disappears, everything else falls with it. The freedom of speech is our first principle, the first in the Bill of Rights for a specific reason. Because if individuals are not allowed to be able to speak freely, they are not allowed to think freely. They are oppressed, and those who are oppressed lose all other rights and freedoms shortly thereafter. And that is what is being taught in our colleges and institutions right now. It is not free speech. It is not the pursuit of knowledge wherever it may take us, the pursuit of asking questions and getting answers to ask even better questions. No, it is merely the indoctrination to accept a consensus of thought promoted by a very specific political ideology with a very specific political agenda. And when that is in play, we reach the dark ages, both for humanity and for nations across the world. This is our wake-up call. This moment in time tells us that we must recognize we are failing our future. We are failing the pursuit of freedom. And as the beacon of freedom dims in the United States, led by our higher learning institutions with the highest of acclaim, so then goes the freedom of speech in the world. And we see more and more authoritarian, autocratic dictatorships start to take precedence. And we are already seeing that across the world. We are seeing the growth of socialism, and we have seen what it results in every single case. Most recently with Venezuela. The promises are always the very best. The promises are always of a great and glorious world of fairness and kindness and free items, and the result is always abject torture, death, and despair in every single case. And we can only expect that to be the high point if the indoctrination has gotten to the point where absolute terrorism, the murder of babies, is condoned and considered to be a positive. If that is what is being taught, the future is even darker than the dark ages of our past. At least that is what we believe. What do you think? Do you think Harvard is promoting free speech or indoctrination? Do you think our colleges across America are looking to produce the next generation of great minds or great followers? We look forward to hearing what you have to say both today and on Sunday in our live stream when we reach out to the world. Thank you. Obey and believe. Hell no! I'm happy to be here with you today. Understand the logic, and we see this in social media on a regular basis, and it's something that Newsweek decided not to tell you about. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee has no idea what she's talking about.
You can meet a very, very stringent accuracy rate when it's important, when it matters, like in federal elections.